Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode this week of Dojo Live. My name is Kim Lantis, airing live from my home in Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico. I'm home alone again with the girls, so if we get interruptions, folks, I apologize in advance. Co hosting with me today is America Guerrero,
Hello, good
still living
morning.
life in Cancun.
Yes, it is with the storms and everything, but yes, here we are.
Exactly. So those are the disclaimers. If America suddenly freezes, you know it's internet. And of course, the star of today's show is Nikhil Gupta. Nikhil, we're so happy to talk with you today. Nikhil is the CEO and founder of ArmorCode. So here we're going to be talking about application security and what that implies. But before we get into that topic, Nikhil, we'd love to get to know you a bit better. Please tell us about yourself, your background, who you are, what makes you tick.
Thanks, Kim and America, for having me. It's great to be there. And Cancun and Mexico is one of my favorite place for vacation. So that's one tidbit about me here. So I'm Nikhil Gupta, co-founder and CEO of ArmorCode. Call me crazy. I started this company in the middle of COVID in July of 2020. So you can know a little bit more about me. That I like to take risk and I like to take challenges. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. Prior to founding ArmorCode, I was a founder and CEO of Avid Secure, which was acquired by Sophos, which was one of the most successful company in Silicon Valley, which is not heard of. And that overnight success came with 26 years of failure. So just to give
Wow,
perspective to
yeah.
the people, that I was starting my first entrepreneurial endeavor back in 1993, which makes me a little bit more aged. So again, with all these
Well,
things,
you
you can.
age really, really well, Nikhil.
So yeah, so the thing here is that those things will give you a good idea about me. Like I don't believe in giving up, and I'm a proud father of a 16-year-old and happily married with my wife. Both of them are not at home, unlike like you came over here. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Perfect. So this 26-year journey leading up to Armor Code and the pandemic madness. But what was it that made you say, yes, we're going to go for it anyway? Let's talk about Armor Code a bit. What do you do? What's the problem that you solve?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So again, Armor Code, we are building the industry's leading application security operations platform. We call it as AppSecOps. And as you can imagine, when the pandemic was hitting and people were kind of going in their safe havens, I was talking to a lot of security leaders, and I realized that there is one big problem with most of the customer were facing is that while the application development, and I know there are a lot of audience are the software developers here, so while a lot of application development processes have transformed from monolithic application to microservices, from waterfall to agile, and people are using a lot of use of open source and everything that's moving to the cloud, application security and product security is not scalable and it's very painful. Like you need at least a dozen tool like SCS, DAS, RASP, IST, pen testing. You can just go on and on for basically securing one application, and they generate a lot of false positive, and the output of these tools don't talk to each other. So you have to get these things out, and especially it's more complicated. And there's a reason why President Biden here in United States talked about having executive order to promote software security or supply chain security, is that it's complicated. There's a security team, development team, and an operations team whose incentives are differently aligned. And last but not the least, there's one application security engineer to 100 developers. So as a result, what happens here is it's really chaotic. And that is where leading into one of the questions we want to discuss is about the automation and everything else. But that problem needs to be solved, and that problem was so painful. And that is where I decided as a serial entrepreneur that I need to take the bulls by the horn and solve the problem. And this problem is actually kind of much bigger than the technology. It needs to be it's a people's problem, and that's why we also created a community called the Purple Book. So for the audience, the purplebook.club is a community by the security leaders for the security leaders, where you can get free knowledge about application security, why we need to do that, supply chain security, and things like that. And we have some very world renowned authors and industry leaders who are behind that. So yeah, so and Armor Code AppSecOps, we are solving this problem. we solve four things. We give you a 360-degree view of your overall. You don't have to log into a lot of different dashboards, if you will. So you get a single pane of glass. Second thing is unified vulnerability management, because you don't need a traditional vulnerability management platform anymore, because the infrastructure also has moved. Third thing is the DevSecOps orchestration and automation. You really want to make sure that you're taking security to the left. And last but not the least, as you are moving and expediting the software development, the compliance needs to be continuous. So this is a AppSecOps platform. So you don't have to have 10 different tools. You can have one single platform which meets all these needs.
Very cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for that high level of ArmorCode. As I'm listening to you, I see some alignment with yesterday's show, actually, and that was with Dan Demers. He's the CEO of Cinchi. Their idea is not with the security side, but with the data side, but still the same kind of issue. He was talking about how the funny thing is, or the irony of how the more technological we get, things are supposed to become simpler, right? But in some ways, they become a lot more complex, which I think is what you've talked about just now. So let's back up to one thing that you said. Did I hear you correctly? There's one security engineer for every 100 or 200 developers?
So yeah, depending upon who you're talking about, is the industry average is 1:100. We have engaged with 30 plus Fortune 500 companies. The ratio in most of them is 1:200. So depending upon who you're talking about, and we recently did a state of AppSecOps survey. Again, this is also available for free at the purplebook.club, where you will get a lot of good statistics on where the industry is, what the pain points are, and what other people are finding in the industry.
Wow. So why the discrepancy? Is this just because I mean, my question is it because there's fewer people who are prepared to take on that role? Like, is it a lack of knowledge and just candidates, or is it because it's just something that companies aren't giving priority to?
So it's a combination. So number one is awareness. So traditionally, the application security budget used to be 25 or 30% of the overall budget, which is going to significantly increase because, especially post-pandemic, most of the things are remote and everything is software. So the need for software security increases, which directly implies that application security needs to have more significance, and hence that President Biden's order for that. So definitely more awareness will hopefully make these things better. Second thing is the lack of availability of the people, right? So there are 3.5 million shortage of people in cybersecurity alone. And that's just going to get worse. And this is where one of the reasons why you need automation, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of mundane stuff what you don't want to be doing when there's a severe shortage. And yeah.
For sure. So let's talk about the automation side a bit more and where ArmorCode fits in. I think you highlighted three main areas. Do you want to go more in depth into each of those?
Absolutely. So let me just take a step back on, first of all, why automation. So for two reasons, right? You want to automate whenever there's a severe shortage of the people. So that is no brainer, if you will. Then the
Just a
second
3.5 million person shortage.
Yeah,
A shortage the size of some countries, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the other important aspect here is, unfortunately, security is a cat and a mouse game, right? The bad guys are already using automation and artificial intelligence to hack. So, for example, if you just look at last couple of years in pandemic, in December of 2020, we had SolarWinds, which was one of the biggest zero-day attack that happened in the history, and it impacted so many millions of companies and billions of dollars of losses. And something like that can be simplified with automation. There's no silver bullet which will solve all the problem. And then when the people thought that, oh, this is going to be once in a 6 year or 1 year, once in a 10 year kind of a thing, then December 2021, Log4j happened. And the same pain point happened, where basically people had to go back and look into their supply chain and find out whether they have those files which are impacting and all. And each time in larger organization, it took them 3 to 4 months to do that. So in a year, in a year, if you can think that you're disrupting all your operations and you're spending 3 to 4 months doing that, that's not a good sign. And that is where the automation kind of comes into play. And now third time people have realized that this Christmas, it's not if, it's what is going to come in there, right? And as a result, that's why people are kind of more interested in automation now, because it just doesn't make sense that every time you get the output from the tools, you put into the Excel sheets, you do the manual correlation, manual deduplication, and spend 3 months just to identify that. And this is where ArmorCode AppSecOps platform comes into play, where it's a single pane of glass. What you take normally 3 months, you can do it in 3 days. And yes, you heard it
Wow.
right. It take 3 days, because we make a complete database, right? And we make application security autonomous, where all of these things comes into here. We have a complete understanding of what your inventory looks like. And so whenever the next thing will happen, because again, I'm not going to lie or sell snake oil over here, that our solutions will prevent it. Nobody can prevent 0 day, because it is 0 day for a reason. You don't know what it is. But once that happens, then you have a whole set of operations that identify whether I'm impacted, if so, how big, when I'm going to fix it, and it is fixed. This is what the board and the CEOs do, right? And this is where exactly AppSecOps platform come into play. So first thing first, you can get a good assessment within few minutes or an hours that, okay, where the impact is, number one. Then we identify that, okay, is it really exploitable? Is it impact? And is it part of your tier one application? Then we help you come up with a plan that, okay, how do you go about it? We can help you create with service level agreements. Yes, this is where you need to fix it, and by which time you need to fix it. Because let's say if you are dojo.live, right, you don't want your application to be down for a single minute, because that's a loss of business. Because at the end of the day, minute lost is a revenue lost. And if imagine if you're a Fortune 50 bank or a Fortune 1 big company like that, it just magnifies that. So as a result, you want to make sure that for your tier one application, that needs to be fixed it like yesterday. And then the third thing here, it's a people thing. You need the developers, you need operations to take it live and everything else. So you want to make sure that it is done or not. So that is where the AppSecOps platform comes into play. And this feature which we are talking about is the application security posture management. Then the second aspect which comes in, that these issues are not necessarily only in the applications, it could also be in the infrastructure. And this is where you don't need to have a separate set of vulnerability management platforms where you go and look into there. Hey, it's a one security team, you're already short in staff. So you could just get into the same platform, vulnerability management information, and there are several other use cases there. Then the third thing here is that this is the reactive which we have to do, unfortunately. But whole world is moving security to the left, or security by design, or whatever you want to call it as, right? And in that particular case, you want to make sure that you are engaging the security into the DevOps processes. And this is where you want to automate that every time when you are moving the code from one DevOps stage to the other DevOps stage, then you are running scans, and you are making sure that when you are having this fast release, that security is being checked at every smaller point. Now that is where DevSecOps orchestration and automation comes into play. And last but not the least, if you're a fintech or a healthcare company, guess what? Now you really need to make sure that you're still compliant, because FDAs and FINRAs of the world makes sure that you are compliant to certain standards, because so that normal people like you and I can rest at peace that, okay, the services by various banks and everything is secure. And so for that, it needs to be compliant. Now if you're having 100, 500,000 releases a year, and you only have once a year compliance, you want to make sure that you are continuously complying. So those are the four aspects that you need to look at it, right? And there are several different solutions which are out there. There are point solutions which are doing only application security posture management, or there are only tools which are doing only vulnerability management, or there are tools which are doing only DevSecOps orchestration, automation, or compliance, right? But again, the challenge that the security leaders have is they're tired of using several point tools to solve the problem, right? So you want to leverage automation to connect the dots between these various stages, and make your life easier. Because last thing you want to do is, instead of planning for your Christmas break, you're planning for your Christmas hack. And in which particular case, you really want to leverage automation, so that you can have a good vacation while the bad guys are trying to kind of go after your environment, or coming up with a yet another 0 day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and taking advantage of the automation. I think one of the things I'm hearing, I'm curious, the people who are the actual users of ArmorCode, is this that the people who are in that 3.5 million shortage, and what impact does a product like yours have on their, let's say, team dynamics? I think sometimes when there are hacks, I mean, we're human, right? So if something does go wrong, I think we've got this innate tendency, maybe, or at least the sensation of like, oh God, I have to fix this, and maybe not be transparent, wanting to fix things on our own, which actually is the worst decision that we can make, because the more we try to do it on our own, the longer it's going to take, etc. So
Yeah, absolutely.
is a
No, I
tool like
get
yours helping
it.
with this transparency and this willingness to have ownership?
Absolutely, and that's why I was saying that DevSecOps is basically not a technology problem, right? 3,500 out of 7,000 security companies which are out there claim they do DevSecOps. And the reason why not necessarily a lot of companies are having a great success is they're looking at technology or building a technology looking for a solution. Whereas, as you mentioned, people are people, humans, right? Now, not only they would want to not be transparent in those scenarios, they will like to blame game, they will like to finger points, and to people's defense, right? So from security team's perspective, my goal here as a security leader would be to make sure the software is secure, and I want to test everything out else very carefully, and it adds a lot of kind of delay, or it slows things down. Whereas, and I used to be a developer 20 plus years ago at Bell Labs. I never cared about security. All I cared about was getting the software out like yesterday,
Release, release,
because
release.
exactly, and that was the benefit I would get, because that's how I was incentivized. And then the third team is the operations team, who wants to take the software and put it into production, and they are only incentivized by making it stable, right? So they want to ensure that when a software is getting out, it is stable and things like that. Now when you have three different personas, right, that's where the challenges happens, and this is where ArmorCode took a people first approach, and we created the platform with these three personas in mind. So we have very elaborate role-based access control, and you can have security team logging in and just seeing the information that they care about, which is the risk part, the service level agreement, and those kind of things, risk scores. Now, when the developer logs in, all they care about here is, I don't want to go into yet another tool by which security is recommending. By the way, developers hate the tools that security recommends. And that is why we have made a very smooth collaboration. So the developers not necessarily need to get into our platform, because we integrate into Jira, ServiceNow, the ticketing system, the Slacks, and the Microsoft Teams of the world, so that they are not having to change their behavior, right? So that is why we are getting such a strong traction, is that developers don't have to change themselves, if you will. And now what happens here is, there is always in security, there is a carrot and a stick, right? So now what happens is, you can always use a stick, and if you are a fintech company or a healthcare company, yes, you may have the powers to do that. But if you are a technology company where the software needs to be shipped yesterday because it's impacting revenue, security sometimes take backseat. Now, in all those cases, you always have to use a carrot and a stick. Now, you could put stick by building a guardrails, and this is another unique thing which we have done. We are helping security team give a better guidance, governance with a guardrails. So what happens here is, typically what happens is, people will say, okay, do this, don't do that. Now, all of those rules are written into a Word file, which nobody reads. Now, in ArmorCode, what we do is, we provide you guardrails that within this boundary, yes, you can go ahead and go. It's just like a bowling, right? And when we
I
are
was going
people.
to say that.
So in the bowling, right, if you're going too straight, then it brings it back. The bumper brings it back, but then it also gives the room that instead of going narrow like this, you have the room to play, and that is what developers like. Okay, give me guardrails, give me some boundaries or freedom to do my stuff. And then security is also happening is beyond this point, that hey, it's not going to go off the shelf, if you will, or of the basically rails, if you will. So this is where we have that both the kind of a carrot and a stick over here, whereas you could save because you are within the guidance, and then we have also added features like knowledge base and other things, and a lot of patent pending technologies which enables and reduces developer work and developer productivity, right? So we have customers who are saving millions of dollars on just saving developer productivity. So to answer your question, like who can benefit, both the developer and the security can benefit depending upon the size of the organization or who wants to embrace it. So again, the platform has multiple roles, and that's how we built it. That it's just not for security or a developer; it's for all.
I can perceive that there is like a learning element there. How long does it take to your users to adapt to this platform? Well, I know that it depends with the persona, right? But how is the process with your clients?
So I learned the lesson hard way. And in one of the early startup, like that's why I said 26 years of failures. So one of the startups which I did back in 2000 2002, basically the challenge was we built the platform very complicated, and as a result, the deployment was a big challenge. Now, the product was technically most superior, but operations wise it wasn't that big, and that was a costly lesson learned. So fast forward, when we built Armor Code, we didn't write a single line of code until we got customer feedback. So the whole platform is built with customer feedback, where we work with customers, we understand their flows and do that. So having said that, we have had Fortune 50, one of the largest world's big four company trained in just 5 hours, right? So that is how simple we have
Wow.
made it. That and again, in a modern SaaS application world today, the platform has to be super easy and intuitive. In fact, as and when we go to the customers and even the partners, or there are a lot of customers who are offering MSSP, managed services security, providing services on top of our platform, they are like, this platform is very intuitive and ready to easy to use on their own.
Wow, that process could be an entirely different show, even just about, I suppose it's the design thinking behind that. So it was conversations, it was interviews, it was mock-ups. What did it look like leading up, this whole process leading up to the pre-coding? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so it was a very interesting and discovery process, right? And that is some of the early joys as a founders in the very beginning. What happens here is, we have to be customer obsessed, customer driven, and that's the company culture. And I know you wanted to touch upon the company culture as well at some point. So it goes and directly weaves into that it is part of the company culture that customers are always number one. We are here for the customers, we are here because of the customers, and so we listen to the customer, we understand the pain points and from the people aspect, right? So now when we are designing the product, and just to give you an idea, right, even when we build the company, my co-founder and CTO came from the developer background for a reason. Because if you had somebody from the security background, he or she would have been jaded that, oh, you know what, this cannot be done, because for past 20 30 years there have been 50 companies and 500 startups which have been trying to solve. And the kind of traction, like we have grown already 3x of our revenue in just last 1 year since we launched, and we are planning to grow by 4x next year, even in these tough times of, first it was pandemic, and now it's the economic turmoil, if you will, because automation is what people really want. That's what we do, is we simplify it. The cost of training is nothing, and once you do it, it basically, the you free up the engineers to do the things much better. And so that is where it leads to that. And yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. And actually, I linking this back to yesterday's show as well. At Sinchi, he mentioned that they're ironically, one of the few tech companies that are actually utilize their own product. Is that the case of ArmorCode as well? Are you, as you're building out, utilizing your product for your own security, and does that actually help your product be a better product?
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of a table stakes, especially when you're building a product, and that's where, my kind of roots are from. That, hey, we want to use the product. We are our biggest customer, or not the biggest. Now, I'm glad that we are not. We have several large customers who are doing that. So, but the thing here is that we do use our product, and it's significantly helping us make the product much better. And yeah.
That's great. So we are actually to the final few minutes of our show, and I'd like to bring it back to you, Nikhil, and your 26 years of failures leading up to success, or your 26 years of succeeding and knowing what not to do. So what would you say to leaders like yourself or those folks out there who are hoping to start a company? What would you say is your number one don't do and your number one do?
Yeah, so starting with number one, don't do is exactly like, don't build the product before talking to customers and understanding and having a very deep understanding of what they do, right? So talk to customers, understand their pain points, do the mock-ups, have a design first thinking, and that way is the approach. So again, do's and don't. Now, of course, number one thing do is, of course, it's a tough world out there, right? Especially like pandemic and economic turmoil. So, number one thing which you want to do is not give up, right? So I didn't give up for 26 years, and it paid off. So I'm hopeful that it will pay off for others as well. And apart from just that the personal grit and everything else, it's about having a very good clarity. And I always tell my team that begin with the end in mind, right? So every meeting, every call, every engagement, you want to be very clear, because unless you're very clear on what the end goal of this, you're wasting your time. And one of the last thing here is, think big, start small, scale fast, right? So you should always have a clarity of where you want to go. So when I was starting this company in the middle of the pandemic, I was very clear this problem is very imminent. It's very big, and I believe the world's largest security company will be from software, and hopefully ArmorCode. And start small. You just start it just with an idea, build a team, and everything else. But as you're building it, scale it fast. Like we are not even a 2-year-old company, but the kind of milestones, the type of customers that we have gotten, and the type of success, we are like more than 50 plus people. We have Fortune 500 customers, things like that. So those things again is make it scale fast, right? Because you're building a company, right? There should be a sense of urgency doing that. You don't want to make it a lifestyle business, especially in technology, because things get obsolete very fast. So it's a constant things, and the things will evolve and change. So continue to listen to the customers, and pivot the product. So like when we started, we are just doing ASPM, if you will, but we took a platform approach, and then we very quickly evolved into AppSecOps now, which can do 4 big things, if you will. So
Thank you. Thank you. Definitely words of wisdom to live by. Thank you so much for your time today, Nikhil. We really do appreciate it. We wish you nothing more than success with ArmorCode. Please stick around for just a minute as we go off air. But America, we do not have a show at 12 o'clock Pacific tomorrow, but we are having a special show on Friday at 12 o'clock Pacific. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, as you said, Kim, we're going to have a show on Friday at the Live Special Edition, and it's going to be about LGBT in tech. 12 p.m. Pacific. Don't miss it. It's going to
That's
be so
right.
excited.
It's going to be a panel discussion with America and I as the moderators, and a few very select and awesome individuals from Ancora who are going to be sharing their experiences with us. Right? So cool. Don't miss it. Friday at 12 o'clock Pacific. Nikhil, thank you again for joining us today. And everyone else, stay safe until the next time.
thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.